We're going to move on to our penultimate session, and it's on the subject of water. Water cooperation for a resilient planet. Now, of course, water is the great paradox of sustainability. It's the most common thing on the planet, and yet it's also our most threatened resource. And I've heard some people who know about such things say that we'll be able to tackle the energy challenge, no problem. We might even be able to crack climate change. But water's going to be the real toughie. And water's going to be the challenge which requires all the toughness of our best expertise to manage. So with that in mind, it's just as well. We've got a very tough bunch of experts on our next panel. Once we've finished identifying them on the tables, I'll invite them up. So just give us one moment to finish that. Okay, I think I'll invite them up while we're just polishing that off so we can crack on. Invite, first of all, the chair, if I may, Dr. David James Molden, Director General of the International Centre for Integrated Mountain Development. Dr. David. And then next, Dr. M. Ariz Ahammed, who's Mission Director of the National Water Mission and a member of the Central Groundwater Board of the Government of India. Dr. Ahammed. And then may I invite Dr. O.P. Agarwal, who is CEO of the World Resources Institute in India. Welcome. And please welcome Dr. Syamal Kumar Sarkar, Distinguished Fellow and Senior Director of the Water Resources Policy and Management Team at TERI. Welcome. And as we always say, last but not least, Dr. Ravi Srivastava, who's First Secretary for Environment, Science and Technology at the Embassy of the United States. Welcome, Ravi.
Okay, Ravi.
Now, to warm us all up, we're going to kick off with 3 short questions that touch on how we can best tackle the water challenge. Here's the first one. What's the most common reason for lack of water cooperation in South Asia? That's an interesting question. Is it lack of trust among neighboring countries? I can't imagine who they have in mind. Lack of understanding about the significance of cooperation, lack of will among politicians, or lack of quantitative knowledge about the water flows. So we don't know how much water there is and where, I think that means. So let us have your opinions on that. Let's start the countdown. There we go. We didn't get the gunshot this time to start us off. Right, and it is interesting, slightly politically charged answer perhaps, that the most common reason for the lack of water cooperation is a lack of trust among neighboring countries, but also there was concern about lack of understanding about the need for collaboration and the lack of knowledge about water flows. It's quite interesting in the light of the recent court judgment over the Kaveri in river between Kerala and Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Any thoughts, panel, on that? Anyone want to stick their head over the parapet? No? I think we'll move on. Oh, yes, please, sir.
Of course, A, everybody knows. Coming to D, this is a major important factor with respect to water, which is poorly measured. If you want to have better management, the basic requirement is measurement. Let us take the case of money, or let us take the case of power. You measure, right from generation till transmission it is measured, so you have full control. When it comes to water, so our measurement systems are so weak, so our control, the distribution, all the disputes, it becomes very difficult to decide. So,
adding on, if you have measurement, often the measurements are not shared between the countries, which erode the trust as well between countries. Yeah. So it's hard to build up that confidence level to share water.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this lack of understanding of the significance of cooperation is one of the reasons why that lack of trust is not going away.
Yeah.
I think if this recognition comes up, the trust issue will come down.
Yeah.
I would have to concur with Dr. Agarwal. Having seen the same thing in the United States, working with tribal and non-tribal people and working within the state of Colorado on various water interests, we found that if you brought people together and let them be together on a regular basis over years, that B developed, which led to A being addressed. that when you see others as a person with a legitimate point of view and a legitimate concern, their needs are legitimized, so are yours, and you can find a via media.
In fact, in addition, I think the lack of understanding the root cause of conflict is one of the basic problems where these are very important. So I think this the number one is exceedingly very well pointed the point, I think.
Yeah.
Trust.
But you could also change countries to states or industries.
Yes. Yep. Yep, exactly. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Major reason for water conflict among neighbors. Individualities, water scarcity, increasing demand, ethnic diversity among neighbors. I think you can interpret individualities in a number of ways, but I think perhaps if you think of it as being distinctive interests that people have, might be one way of doing it. So, well, interpret it as you wish. Let's go for the vote on that. Oh, got the gunshot back. Right, a quite straightforward conclusion, really, that increasing demand and water scarcity are the two big issues. We want too much of it, and we don't have enough of it, basically. It's quite heartening that ethnic diversity seems to be very, very low on the list. Thoughts there?
Again, things are related. So I feel individualities actually play a big role too, because if I have water, I don't want to give it up necessarily. Then we have water scarcity and increasing demand, which say I really don't want to give it up because there's more water scarcity. So all those things play together.
Actually, the demand is not a question of the actual demand, it's a perception, you know, that my demand will go up in the near future. So I think this is very important from the point of view of conflicts among the neighbors.
Yeah.
If I can add to that, what Dr. Sarkar was saying, that to me the issue of scarcity is partly in your perception. I can talk about experience in Colorado, in western US, where it's a very dry area. And they were, unlike many cities in the world who always want new batches of fresh water, they said they're not getting any more fresh water. So they put up sewage plants that would create drinking water. You can recycle water. That took care of scarcity.
Yeah, there are ways and ways. Okay, let's have the third and last question, please. Right, the most effective instrument in encouraging intersectoral water cooperation. So a system of benefit transfer to the deprived sector, either the one lacking water, privatization of water delivery system to improve efficiency, a barter system for water, or something based on polluter pays, leading to penalties and sanctions. It'd be quite interesting to have an E, all of the above on this one, wouldn't it? But let's pick what we think is the most prominent issue. So go ahead, vote on what you think is the real priority in all this. Make the polluter pay, that old environmentalist cri de coeur, yes, by far the strongest one. I suppose polluter isn't necessarily the same as the person who abstracts the most water.
That's correct.
So, but perhaps there's an element of interpretation on that one. Any thoughts, team?
I think the critical thing is a recognition of the value of water. I don't think in society we've really begun to value water as a resource that's not going to continue the way we are. And I think a lot of these measures coming in will help emphasize the importance of more efficient use of water, basically.
I had actually voted for A. I guess I'm wrong. Nobody else, very few other people did. But actually, we talk a lot about benefit sharing. So in water cooperation often means that water gets transferred from one sector to the next. For example, agriculture over to industry or environment into agriculture. But I think what then has to happen is concurrently some system where the loser gets some kind of compensation.
Speaking of compensation, I mean, that's, earlier today I was having a discussion with people, should we price water? And the immediate knee-jerk answer was absolutely no. You cannot price water. But then these are the same people who pay something like 15 rupees for a bottle that size. So pricing is coming into the picture. And I think at some stage, we may have to swallow the idea that water can be a marketable commodity.
So I will be highlighting this question number 2 and 3 in my address.
I think the polluter pay principle only will not work actually. This could be combined with other things. So I think this is...
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. I just leave you with the thought that usually what we value we're prepared to pay for, and we usually pay for what we value.
Bingo.
Right. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Dr. David to lead our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. I thought we could just go on, though, because that was definitely a good exercise to get our minds thinking. So what we have here is an issue that's, I think, very close to almost everybody's heart all over the world, is how to cooperate around water. The benefits, and that was spelled out, that was a big issue. The benefits of cooperation are very, very high. For sure, if we think of society, that if we cooperate better, we'll have more economic growth. And I'm just thinking about hydropower, how we could optimally put in hydropower development if we could think about whole river basins instead of national interests. Sustainability, would be greater. If we could think about sharing with environment. I think there's a huge issue of equity in this. Who are the winners and losers in water? Somehow to make the system more equitable would be a benefit of water cooperation. One issue we face with a lot is floods and droughts and disasters. So if there's some way that we could cooperate about water, I think we could reduce the negative impacts of disasters as well. And finally, I think there's a big peace dividend when we're talking about, even in communities, talking about water. So the question then that I hope we explore, why isn't there more cooperation? I think and it kind of came out here, it's such a visceral topic, and there's a certain sovereignty about water that really it's hard to give up. You don't want to give up your right to water so easily. I'm sure there are many other issues that could be explored. On top of that, now we have two big drivers of change coming in, and one was alluded to in the presentation. One is about growing water scarcity, and that's, big driver of that is increasing demand. And agriculture is a huge consumer of water as well. So when we're getting more population eating more food, we'll see less water in a sense to go around. The other is climate change. And I work up in the mountains, and we feel it and see it, especially with things like glaciers melting, which has impact on when and where water is available. But in addition, what I fear most from climate change is the increased hazards from both floods and droughts. And if we can get better ready for that through better water cooperation, there'll be very big payoff. The costs of non-cooperation are too high. Right? I can think about environmental degradation. It was interesting. The polluter pays idea was there. We'll see increased poverty because water tends to flow not necessarily downhill, but to more money, wealthier people. We'll see increased damages from disasters and possibly conflict, although fortunately, we've been able to avoid that looking in the future. So it's what's critical at this moment is really to look at the institutional arrangements around water sharing, right, to build those up in the future. And I did want to say that there are a lot of bright spots in this too, and I hope the panelists will explore those as well. Certainly at community levels, there's a lot of bright spots as far as water sharing, where where I work in the mountains, my institute works in 8 countries, and there are 10 river basins, 7 out of 10 are shared. And so it's quite interesting working across different countries and actually seeing the mistrust. But what has worked, right, and good entry points into cooperation, one is just about knowledge, about science, sharing ideas and experience across country, building that trust. And very much, I think we should be working together around climate change to understand what the impacts will be. In addition to that, we've seen interesting communities from Nepal actually making a phone call to communities in India when a flood was coming. What better water cooperation could you have in this area? And I'm sure there are other stories, so it's building on those stories. So this session then will explore that cooperation at different levels. Number one is across sectors, industry, city, agriculture, environment, for example. And between states, it's interesting, we had the Karnataka, Tamil Nadu did I get it right? The states, this discussion has been buzzing, and hopefully we'll shed light on how to move forward with more cooperation. So we have a wonderful panel to discuss this. And at first, I would like to invite Dr. Ariz, who's the Mission Director, National Water Mission in India. Dr. Ariz, or Mr. Ariz.
And the delegates. Friends, my topic focus is on water governance. In governance, we all know the effective management of resources. For example, you all know the word budget. Union budget, state budgets, and every company, corporate, every organization has a budget. What exactly it does? It brings a discipline among the different conflict interests, both supply, demand, income, and expenditure. So similar exercise we are trying to do in water sector for a number of reasons. Of course, since my designation is Mission Director, National Water Mission, basically this institution is set up to address the climate change impact on water, how best we should go ahead. So, but my presentation now is limited to the water budgeting, how best to bring in cooperation, convergence, and synergy. So, no speech should begin without water cycle, because that is the picture we always should remember. In practice, we forget, so the problem is never addressed. So this is the scenario of India in terms of water. So what amount of land we have and what amount of water resources we are availing and the per capita availability of water. So this is a slide which drives my whole presentation. Since 1950s, our per capita availability has gone down so steep, perhaps the lone country in the world witnessing such a good, this scenario, should we celebrate or should we rethink, revisit our whole exercise? That is that's what this particular slide says. Yes, population has increased, agriculture area under irrigation has increased, industrialization has increased. Despite all this much steep decline, suggests something serious. So that makes us to relook at whole of our exercise, the way we are looking at the water, the way we are intervening water. Of course, groundwater, the scenario is, it is already there. We are already water stressed country. Different parts of India are water scarce. So everywhere, though we are in Delhi, capitals, we are fine, but much of India is facing this water problem. So in terms of law, because I am representing government as a nation, where water fits in. Under constitution scheme, water is a state subject. If you recall the earlier slide, if this steep is declining and if somebody has to act upon it, I am sure now you are clear. If water is a state subject, who should be the actor, main actor? It is the state government. So that clarity is required at every level, especially among the states, because they are the players. Of course, the anchor has rightly mentioned about yesterday's judgment of the Supreme Court. So that provides, the Constitution provides interstate disputes are union subjects. That is where the whole exercise is there. But for us, for the discussion, it is water is a state subject. So here I share the parallel experience, how do we see water? So let me take finance side. The finance, to run a finance in whether it is government or private sector, there is a finance wing of finance ministry which controls both income and expenditure. Then take the power ministry, power sector, both generation, distribution, transmission is controlled by one agency. And their resource sector is measured. So the control is very effective. When it comes to water, the supply, the income and expenditure, that is supply and demand, totally run by 30 different ministries. Okay. You don't have single agency which monitors, measures, supervises this particular sector. So before that, just I am repeating for my benefit, rather I am sharing my journey of ignorance in my own ministry about water. Okay. So the supply side, the quantity and quality dimension, many a time we forget. Even if you see a history of my own ministry, it speaks a lot because we as a society, as a nation, we require a revisiting our whole approach. And within quantity, supply and demand side, just I am listing supply and demand. So the whole source of water for any nation, like income tax, GST, whatever tax comes, income for the nation, and similarly expenditure across the different sectors. So for us, the water main source is rainfall. So right from the rainfall, then similarly we have glaciers, springs, river basins, projects, wetlands, which includes lakes, tanks, coastal areas, groundwater, wastewater. If you see each of these items are run by, for example, precipitation is Ministry of Earth Sciences, IMD. And then glaciers, it took me 8 months to understand which ministry handles glaciers. Okay. So similarly, there are 15 ministries which are handling this particular supply side. And coming to the demand side, it is almost more than 20 ministries. The question is that the demand side, the consuming ministries, the sectors are oblivious, never bothered about the availability, the supply side. So we want that particular, because in the finance side, if I need more demand, more money, I will not go and loot the treasury. What I do, I will discuss the finance ministry, I renegotiate. But in case of water, we indulge direct pumping from the groundwater. So we want that this organized conflict should be managed with proper water budgeting by measuring both supply side and demand side. And so just I am giving my history of my own ministry. It actually started with the Ministry of Irrigation. It took a journey of 30 years to know and revisit, rename, though still 90% of our ministry is irrigation only, continues to be irrigation. So what all I am trying to say is that if we want better water management, we should be very clear about our supplies and we should continue to nurture to be good, develop it so that our rivers are not dried, glaciers are not dried, springs are not dried. And for example, 30,000 crores we are investing on under NREGS. What is the evidence base is that we are doing? So we need to have some measurement system. So similar demand side, how best with less water we can do this all requirements. So demand management also equally important. But if you want to improve both supply and demand, you have to improve their governance. Because 30 ministries are involved, you have to improve the governance. So that is where we can use the role of technology. So these are all the different factors we are roping in. And this is my final slide. So what I am saying is that we should be clear identifying the stakeholders, both government and non-government, and common understanding is very much required, and identified single agency is required, and measurement system, culture of measurement should be started every sector, and harmonized, because unlike other sectors, water flows through the hydrological unit. It cuts across the states. So like Kaveri dispute, it cuts across the 4 states. So now this harmonizing the science, that is the hydrology, with the political units, the states. So that is one important aspect which we have to do it. Accordingly, we have to re-engineer the whole governance. So that is what we are trying to do, institutionalize state water budgets like financial budgets in 11 state governments. So we are doing this exercise. Thank you very much.
Ariz, you asked a question, how do we view water? I think it's a great question because people view it in many different ways, but also very much appreciated that emphasis on governance and streamlining the system. So many different actors involved in that, all seeing water in different ways. Okay, wonderful. I would like to turn to Agarwal, who's the CEO of World Resources Institute. And he'll also be talking about intersectoral cooperation. Good.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And my presentation is going to be a very, very narrow focus compared to what Dr. Ariz Ahammed has presented at a much wider, broader scale. Just a few points that I would make. Between 2013 and 2016, 14 of our largest thermal power utilities had one or more shutdowns. And all this because of water shortages. 14 of them in a period of these 4 years, all because of water shortages. They lost revenue to the extent of about 9,000 crores during this period. And most of these thermal utilities are running such heavy losses that an amount of 9,000 crores is a fairly significant amount for them. That's one thing that I really wanted to highlight. On the energy sector and the energy-water nexus, some of the concerns that are really coming up are, about the demand on the water sector from the energy sector is likely to go up from something as little as 0.6% today to almost 9% by 2050, which means from 5 billion cubic meters to 130 billion cubic meters. That's the kind of demand that the energy sector is going to ask for in the years to come. 70% of India's thermal power plants are going to face increased competition from other sectors. Frankly, 70% is because a lot of these power plants are not in water-stressed areas. Otherwise, as we go further, they're all going to face very severe competition from other sectors. And this is what scares me the most. 40% of our freshwater cooled thermal capacity is in high water-stressed areas. So what's going to happen to these power plants? How much are they going to be generating? Are they going to be facing continuous shutdowns because water is not available? I mean, this is something that's of grave concern. So far about energy and water. In fact, we've done a study. The author of this paper, Deepak, is sitting right here. We call it Parched Power. And this has really analyzed what's been the impact on thermal power because of water stress. That's a very interesting result that these have thrown up. Anyone who's interested in discussing more about this, Deepak is here. He'll be happy to discuss it further. But looking at other sectors, we're going to see increased consumption from many other sectors. Drinking water, industry, energy, I've already explained to you, a whole lot of others. With the kind of urbanization taking place, we have about 377 million people in urban areas today. This is expected to go up to 850 million by 2050. The kind of consumption or water consumption from this sector is obviously going to go up very steeply. Obviously, industry and others will go up. And as was mentioned in the beginning, agriculture. When you have an increasing population and the same amount of land, the kind of agricultural practices that are going to be used will demand more and more water. So irrigation needs from water are going to be increasing very rapidly. Now, given that, what are the solutions? Frankly, the solutions have been presented by Dr. Ariz Ahammed. They've been discussed. They've been put up on those questions. Many of you have given that. But more than going through these individual bullets, one thing that I would like to really highlight here is, looking at the energy sector, I think water stress is another powerful argument in favor of renewables. We've had this discussion on renewables. As a country, of course, we've made commitments about how much renewable energy we're going to be producing. There have been some discussion about stranded coal assets and all that. But in that whole debate, this issue of water stress being a factor in making renewable energy a more powerful argument, that's something we need to think about. Of course, the Ministry of Environment has come up with efficient cooling technology regulations for power plants. This is something that needs to be seriously thought about. And there's one more question about lack of data, availability of data on water flows. I think availability of data all around on water is going to enable more efficient monitoring on how we use water. I think the important thing is not so much the supply side, not so much talking about per capita availability of water, that of course is going to be important, but what is going to gain ground is per capita consumption of water. How efficient are we in consuming water? That's going to become an important factor going forward. And what I'm really trying to wind up with is assess the demand side requirements and design projects more efficiently. And in doing that, is there a case for doing something like a water impact assessment for a lot of investments that we do? A lot of infrastructure projects that come up in cities, for example, a lot of buildings that come up in cities, you have something called a traffic impact assessment that is done. Most projects have an economic impact or an environmental impact assessment that is done. Is there a case for something like a water impact assessment to also be done for many of these investments? So I think increased social awareness about water use and why use of water is more efficient is something that will build up pressure bottom up on making water a priced commodity or a valuable commodity. I'll leave it to that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. It was quite a striking image. That I was surprised to see the thermal plants without water, and it was a very interesting presentation. But I just really like the emphasis on the demand side management. How do you get more with less water, basically, is something we really, really have to strive for. My only question would have been, what happened? Where, even with that, where is the energy sector going to get the water, given that increased, not enough water to go around?
Focus on renewables.
Focus on renewables. So just don't ask for more water, just do something different. Focus on renewables. Great, great advice. I was going to ask Ravi, because you're Dr. Ravi Srivastava, to give our next presentation. And Ravi is the first Secretary for Environment, Science, and Technology at the U.S. Embassy. You must be a professor to do that. That's fine.
Thank you for staying back so long. We are the only people between you and freedom. So I want to recognize my colleague from the U.S. Embassy, Stuart Davis, who's a colleague of mine, and we work together in various areas. I won't take much time. You know, people talk a lot about water stresses and the challenges and scarcity, and those numbers as the population increases, the per capita number. To me, water is not like land that you can cut it up and that's the end of it. Water is a recyclable commodity. It's just there's a problem here in our minds that keeps us from thinking along that line. So let me first talk a little bit about, I really welcome the Honorable Supreme Court's ruling yesterday because it laid down a certain marker that might shed some, it might offer a mechanism by which to subside, subdue, diffuse some of the interstate water disputes that we've been talking about. Litigation, you've seen quite a bit of litigation over the past few years on interstate water disputes in India. I'm going to share a little bit about my experience in Colorado. We found an intense amount of litigation that was going on water issues, both water quantity and water quality. And the litigation was bitter, it was long, it was extremely expensive. I mean, the people who benefit were good lawyers. But it did not move the system forward. Things did not change. It was just a logjam. I go back to the Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court's pronouncements several times, which have been made, and also the interstate water tribunals also have said, we need to foster water cooperation. These disputes cannot be solved by a statement by the Supreme Court. With all due respect on the decision that was offered yesterday, as Dr. Molden said, with climate change in picture, are those numbers of 1,000 million cubic feet going to stay put? That's an average. As a hydrologist, the first thing we are taught is the principle of stationarity, that you take data over 50, 60 years, you average all the numbers, and you come up with an average quantity, and that's what the Supreme Court was dividing yesterday. Now, what happens in the next year when the water flow is 60% of that? Are they back in the court? So I go back to a decision that was made way back in 1943 by the US Supreme Court, and I have to read that one. Forgive me for my beautiful voice. Essentially, they were saying water problems are complex and with changing conditions. We all know that. But they go on to say mutual accommodations and agreement should be the medium of settlement and not adjudication by court. That was 1943. That did not stop lawsuits being filed in the US. Just last month, there was a lawsuit filed by Colorado. So having seen the issue of litigation not going anywhere, what we found in the state of Colorado was that the state created a legitimate and credible negotiation mechanism for all parties. And I want to honor Dr. Srinivas Chokakula from the Center for Policy Research, who has talked a lot about the need for frameworks and mechanisms by which people who are contesting can come together and discuss. You don't have to solve it, but you can at least begin discussions that might eventually lead to some sort of a give and take. And so in Colorado, what we found was that the state said, this litigation business is not working. Hours spent in the court, thousands of dollars in lawyers' pocket, and you go nowhere. So the state of Colorado said, with the authority vested in us, what we will do is we'll create a model, an open forum for people to come and talk about the issues. So the state of Colorado, with the federal government's help, and some buy-in from stakeholders, they created what's called the Colorado Water Quality Forum. And anybody who had an interest in this business was allowed to come. You didn't have to pay much, $20 a month, $10 a month, as less than what you spend for coffee. So people would come, and there would be a big, large table around which people could sit and talk. So Greenpeace kind of people were there, NRDC was there, and then people like me who used to operate sewage plants were there, regulators were there, and ag industry, everybody was there. The initial meetings were intensely difficult. I remember a similar meeting several years ago in a tribal area in the United States, and this is 1996, and we had to be screened for guns. Because in Colorado, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And the most powerful person in that gathering was the facilitator. There was no mediation. The facilitator was there who kept people in check. And the first meeting, there was a huge amount of emotion. People were angry. You, there was a lot of finger pointing. You did this, you did that. But after that, the next meeting, they had vented. And then you had to move on to, well, this is the reality. This is all the water we got. These are the problems we have. What do we do about it? And then you started recognizing the other person. And this happened month after month after month. We met there. And I'll give you the best example that we saw. It was, unlike Delhi, which has the power to get water from any place in North India, practically speaking, in Colorado, the side of the mountain, western side of the mountain, they decided we're not going to give any more water to this big, nasty city called Denver. You deal with what you got. You're getting no more fresh water. So they said, we'll have to recycle wastewater and make it fit for drinking. We needed a regulation on that. And the environmental groups that came on loose, they said, we want ultra-pure distilled water level quality coming out of the pipe. You can't do that. We spent 3 years in a working group. Every week we would meet, month after month after month after month. But eventually we came, not necessarily as consensus, it was a majority vote, but we passed the wastewater reuse regulations, and they could recycle water so that now they treat the wastewater, inject it in the ground, pick it up 2 miles later, and sell it as drinking water. And nobody's any wiser. Clapping? So what I'm saying is that the solutions exist, but you just have to recognize the other person's legitimate interest and do a little bit of give and take. What Dr. Agarwal was saying, that is how you build trust. And I'm going to do a little bit of dangerous talk here. The embassy has partnered with TERI to attempt to do something similar with 2 North Indian states who've been fighting over water. We are just making a little foray in that to try to bring the same mechanism we saw in Colorado That is not the magic key. But the bottom line is, if you ain't going to talk, it ain't going to solve the problem. You can go to all the courts you want in the world, and it's a stalemate after that. So I just say, like at home, for family problems between my wife and me, or water between two states, or within the states, you got to talk regularly, you got to give and take, and that's the solution. Thank you.
Okay, well done, very animated, very good, great presentation with great examples from Colorado. A few points picking up, what it does take is some trust building. Absolutely. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes, so to speak, and seeing what their point of view is. And it takes a long time to build this confidence. I imagine also the data plays into that as well.
Absolutely.
What's really
Good
happening
science is crucial.
With water. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, I would like to move to Dr. Sarkar, Distinguished Fellow and Senior Director, Water Resources Policy and Management at TERI. Dr. Sarkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to concentrate on a small portion of the water cooperation issues, particularly the principles and the norms which are often used in this kind of debate. If you look at the water diplomacy and the water cooperation issue, either in the local context or the national context or in the global context, three things are very important challenges. The first one is the lack of understanding the root cause of conflict of water sharing. And this often the perception takes precedence over the actual on the ground. Second thing is that the lack of communication and the lack of trust, which I think Dr. Ravi has just spoken, which is very important. The two countries or the countries in the basin, they don't trust each other. They often go in different directions. And the third one is very important, the lack of implementation framework. For example, that if you are familiar with the international the developments in this area, the non-navigational water recourse convention was it is a multilateral forum, and only few countries they have ratified this convention. No South Asian countries are a party to that convention. So this is the kind of absence of the implementation framework even at various international level when you are talking about the countries. Even the bilateral agreements are not coming over a longer period of time. The water is a very highly politicized and very emotive issue. To be very frank, that whatever developments we have seen in Indian context and also international context, we feel that these are the two points which dominates the water debate and the water conversation in this area. Now, if that is the fact, then how does one go about it? Take the case of India. India, we have the national water policies of 1987, then it was revised in 2002, then subsequently in 2012, we have the national water policy. The national water policy talks about water framework law, but which does not give the details of what this law should contain. Fortunately, the Ministry of Water Resources have brought out a draft national water framework giving the principle of water governance, which I think Dr. Ariz was talking about the governance, certain principles of water governance in this area. And if you look at that governance principle, there is a section where the norms or the principles for water cooperation when there is a interstate water conflict arises. In fact, if you look at the Indian national water policies, one of the key themes is that water is a scarce and also a national asset. It is a scarce commodity, it is a limited resources and has to be conserved and treated accordingly. Now, the same reflection which we have seen in many of the judgment of the court or the other tribunals. Now, coming back to, again to the draft national water framework, how does sharing of water in the basin states should take place? These are the main questions which there is no legal framework as on today in India and also in many other countries in the region. But there is an attempt in the draft framework law how one can approach this subject. For example, that one has to ensure that one has to understand that the water resources of a river basin is not owned by any of the states who are party to the river basin. But as a trustee of these water resources of the river basin, they have the right to use of these resources. When we are saying that right to use, does it mean the equal rights? No, it does not mean any equal right, it should be equitable rights. In fact, I will come a little later how the Supreme Court yesterday had also laid down certain principles on this subject. Now, if you are a upper riparian countries or upper riparian state, you should not you should have a minimal approach to advance intervention in the river system. If you want to intervene into the river system or the river flow, you need to consult the lower riparian state. You have to cooperate with them. So, these are some of the principles which the draft framework law of the Ministry of Water Resources they attempted. Now, yesterday's judgment between on the Kaveri water issue is very important. I think most of you are quite familiar with this, but those who are not familiar with this, this issue arose more than a decades back in India. There are 4 states involved, but the two major states are directly involved. One is Karnataka and another is Tamil Nadu. The Water Tribunal gave an award in 2007, and that award was notified after 6 years in 2013, and that was contested in the court of law by both the states. Now, the Supreme Court yesterday made a seminal contribution in the field of understanding the norms. What should be the norms to arrive at a decision of water sharing between various states? So, what the Supreme Court had done, they have slightly modified the order of the Water Tribunal by giving a little more water to Karnataka by reducing a little more from the Tamil Nadu's share. But while dealing with the subject, they have dealt with many important principles. For example, is that the Helsinki principles of 1966, they have considered. They also considered Campione rules. They also considered the Berlin rules on the subject of equitable sharing of water resources. Now, and also they also detoured the sentiment of the national water policies that the water, river water is a national asset. It is not owned by any member states. So, it belongs to everybody, those who are in that basin states. So, you have to treat the water accordingly. So, what I am trying to say is that still the the legal framework is evolving. It has not been crystallized in a legal form, although there are judicial principles, although there are principles of tribunal which are in the making. So I strongly feel that a framework which the Ministry of Water Resources is trying to evolve has to take shape, has to be in place in the immediate future. Only then we will be able to follow that principle in our day-to-day affair without going to the litigation methods. So thank you very much for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, also for shedding some light on the Kaveri issue and highlighting the need for institutional and legal frameworks. It was interesting that the case went to court, and then we were hearing from Ravi that another approach would say, we don't want it in court, we want you all to work it out. So I'm not sure which, maybe a combination would be quite good, but two different styles of working out this conflict. Now,
court took a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a very long time. And some cases are still not resolved.
So if you go to court, it takes a long time. If you're able to work it out between yourselves.
You can begin to try and do some things. I mean, if somebody's twisting your arm, make it work out.
Okay. I think, Martin, we have a little bit of time, don't we, for some floor interventions? I hope so. I don't see them, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll start over here. Maybe take 3 or 4 questions, then we'll have some response. I do see right in the middle 2 hands that right there in the middle.
Yeah.
And please say your name. And if you have anything left or right, we'd appreciate any comments.
Hello. Hi, I'm Prasenjit Pawar. I'm a research and development engineer of UC Berkeley. So I was waiting for you all to talk with you and clear my confusion regarding the problem that we are facing in West Bengal and Bangladesh. So we all know that the groundwater of West Bengal and Bangladesh is contaminated mostly with arsenic, and 200 million people around the world facing this problem. Though this is not due to climate change, but this is a natural, mostly occurring problem. 70% of it due to natural and 30% for the industrial. So for last 30 years, we are facing this problem in Bengal, and a lot of solution has been implemented. So I will take a little bit more time because
I think just please make it short. Okay?
Short, okay.
Don't take it, yeah.
So I have worked with UC Berkeley and we have solved this problem. The technology that I've used is one of the most locally affordable and cost affordable technology. So my question is, right now I have developed this product in the field and it is running very nice, and now the time has come to scale it up and spread it to all other parts where people are facing this problem.
Let's do that.
Now, when I went to the financial institutions to get funding and spread this technology in other parts, so I'm not getting the positive response. So this asking is a lot of geopolitical problems are there to solve this problem. So sir, my question is to Dr. Ahammed sir. So how this geopolitical problem I can overcome and take the funding and solve this problem and scale this problem and scale this solution and spread this technology to other parts.
Okay, let's keep that question. I saw many hands. I see them in the middle. I'm not seeing outside. I'm going to take that one just on the side. Then somebody is next over here. I can't. Okay, good. Please.
Yes. So my name is Avnav. I am working in TERI as an associate fellow. My question is that the situation which arose into Cape Town recently, and it said that they will lose all the drinking water by April this year. So do you think this type of problem can come in near future or in a year or two in India in any of the cities or town?
Okay, good question.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Kumar from CSTV. First, my observation: water is a God's property. Water is a God's property. God means generator, operator, damager.
Sorry?
Can you introduce yourself?
Myself, H. Kumar from CSTV and access to media, energy media.
Okay.
First is how water is utilized in India is a climate change issue. If we utilize the water in agriculture, that's put to our oxygen, that's put to the food production, that's put to our livelihood also in rural area agricultural development. If the water is utilized in building, that not produce any water, any oxygen, any food production, any other sources, but unutilized. So what should the paradigm shift in this scenario? Why not to organize a special agriculture zone to the rural development as a judicious use of water in India? That is called SAJ, Special Agricultural Zone.
Okay, good, emphasizing agriculture. Again, I see in the middle, so keep going there. Take a couple more and then we'll just answer.
Hello. Hi, my name is Varun. I'm from ETH Zurich. Just being curious, my question is that, sir, you talked about water impact assessment. That's a good idea, but my question is water impact assessment on the basis of a particular project. Like if you want to do water impact assessment project-wise, isn't it gonna be a really difficult task? So, and the second thing is like water impact assessment in terms of what? In terms of the impact on the quality of water or the quantity of water that we use. So just being curious, I just want to know these 2 points. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
sir.
my question is regarding the drinking water. I think our drinking water is more costlier than milk.
Can I ask to introduce yourself?
Introduce yourself,
Yeah, Dr.
please.
Sarjit Dudeja.
Okay.
I'm trying to say we are drinking water is much more costlier than milk. The way we are doing RO process, 4 times water is being wasted. So why not to innovate some technology so that there is no wastage of water and is cheaper than milk?
Okay, yes, please, up at the front. And we'll do one more and then we'll
This
respond.
This is Shishir Tamotia from Ion Exchange.
Okay.
I was just wondering, there is an underlying assumption that water can't be manufactured. Do you think we have given up on that? I mean, we can definitely have technologies, can create technologies wherein water can be created to meet the need of the people.
Okay, one last intervention.
I'm
by the woman.
Savita Bhutani from Art of Living Foundation, and we are working on 27 rivers for rejuvenation. So I wanted to ask this question: what is the scope of rejuvenation, and how much the government and other agencies are working on it?
Okay, good. I think we've got a lot of questions. Maybe what I propose is that you answer a few, you answer a few, and maybe Dr. Sarkar, you could start, and we'll just.
Let me ask the first question about the arsenic and the geopolitical issue. I think one of the researchers just mentioned. You see, in any water sharing debate between India and Bangladesh, and in particular West Bengal and Bangladesh, the quality issue is often ignored, because the arsenic affected areas exist in both the countries. But when we talk about the water related cooperation, we talk only on how the water is shared, the river water is shared, the surface water is shared, but not the other kind of water resources. So you are absolutely correct that it is a kind of deficiency in our approach in water arrangement when we talk transboundary water evolution. So this is a weak point, and I think slowly the recognition is that one has to look at the water as a whole, not only on the surface water but also groundwater, the quality and also quantity.
Okay.
Second point about the water crisis, just we are seeing in Cape Town. You see, in India, if you believe the estimate of our experts, the experts say that by 2050, we will be reaching to a situation where the per capita availability of water per year will be touching the water scarcity level. So this is one of the estimate of the experts in our country. Now, if you look at the distribution of water, a special distribution of water in the country and the time variation, you will find in some state or some place you will have the abundant rain, in some place there are scanty rain. So, if that is so, you will find a situation where the scanty rain fed areas, you will have a situation almost like that. For example, if you look at the Latur, if you look at some of the Marathwada region, they do not get supply of water every day. They have to wait for many days in a week to get their drinking water. So, I think this situation is really quite serious in that sense that we are approaching a situation where we will be having this kind of problem in the near future.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Sarkar. Maybe you could take one or two.
Just the only one I wanted to talk about was this issue of the water impact assessment methodology. To be honest, we haven't come up with any framework for how this would be done. The idea was that if you build in the need for something like this into every project, the message you are conveying is water is important. I think that's the basic idea with which I said that perhaps a water impact assessment would be a good thing. Whether it can be done project by project or whether it should be quality versus quantity or both is something that will evolve once a water impact assessment tool gets developed.
Okay, great. Dr. Ariz.
So regarding Cape Town, just I address, because Cape Town is the second largest city in South Africa, so it is in limelight. If you see any vernacular newspaper in India, large scale migrations are happening just for the water. I hail from Andhra Pradesh, okay? So when I read about my own district news, small villages, they just migrated, just water is not available. For last 2-3 years, there are no rains. So these are happening, only thing is that the kind of seriousness, the governance, the issue is of governance. So the amount of rainfall every year, how much we get is very known. And how much expenditure we want to use, it is our indulgence. So if expenditure exceeds the supply, so naturally we will have problem. So this simple basic which we apply in our own home, every government, every company applies, so we have to do it. It is there, already we are a water stressed country, and it does not mean that water scarcity is not there. In number of villages, places, water scarcity is seriously happening. Okay. And second thing is that regarding the agriculture. See, in general, in our ministry, we all say, we hold the opinion that around 80% of water consumption in the country is in agriculture sector. Okay. And now the question is that how irrigation, agriculture means that how we do irrigate our crops, just by flooding, just water is put to the whole field. And the same thing if you do in micro irrigation, you save 80% of water. So the question is that how efficiently you use your water by, you have technology. Similarly, in your day-to-day use. So you use bathing, so use a different nozzle, you have similar experience. Use the washing machine with the efficiency, you have different experience. So similarly, we have red star labeling for the energy efficiency. So why not there be water labeling for our equipment? The question is that the technology, the supply and demand management governance, it has to be seen as a holistic way to address the issue. And another issue which I finally speak is on the technology and arsenic. Of course, we cannot address your financing and commercialization of your technology. But definitely, yes, it is an issue of water quality dimension, it's not a quantity. Even in India, the eastern India, water is enough because the western India and much of central and south India is water, they are suffering, means there is a lot of water scarcity, stress, everything is there. But if you take the eastern India, a lot of water is there. I worked in Assam for 15 years, Sir also my senior colleague, so full of water. The water consumption is very, very less. But question is that there we have to adopt different means, but the water quality is the major problem. What is the impact of water quality? Immediate public health issues are there. So the water resource department and public health department, see it is, they have to take care. It is the state subject, means definitely it's a government subject to take care of the health of the people. Providing drinking water is responsibility of the government. So you have to address, but when it comes to commercialization of your technology, okay, you have to better consult the right consultant.
Okay, Ravi.
I wanted to talk about Arnav and the comment about Cape Town. way back when I was working in Colorado, I remember a story of a town in the state of Kansas in the 50s. They ran completely out of water. There was no fresh water available. And they had been pumping their sewage into a little dry creek which was dammed up downstream. Guess where they got their water from? They had to recycle the water, the sewage, from the dam which had been accumulating sewage for months. Because there was no choice. Marta kya na karta ki sthiti pahunch gayi thi. So to me, I mean, a few weeks ago, I was boating down the beautiful Yamuna River with a couple of my colleagues from the embassy. And there is water that nobody wants. Delhi is willing to go, big cities, they have muscle power, money power, they are willing to go up to Himalaya and get whatever water they want. The sewage also has value. And if it comes to a stage where the water is no longer available, we may have to embrace ideas. So to me, the problem is not with the government, the problem lies in our minds. We need to open our minds and embrace ideas. Concepts like water pricing. You can pay 20 rupees for a water bottle when you're at the railway station. You can pay 70 rupees for the same water in a fancy hotel. But when you're growing crops, when you're running industry, some pricing has to be there. I would rather have an industry run, in my opinion, where I could buy a water from somebody and be assured that I'll have water all year round to run my business. So some concepts we need to wrestle with. With that, I thank you.
Okay, excellent, Ravi. I'll just have some sum up words for the session, and it's very difficult to sum up. But what I was happy, the situation is dire, right? With the growing scarcity. But I do believe that when we're pushed, necessity will help us overcome the problem too. And we did have several solutions mentioned. Number one is that we have to focus on governance and institutions to solve this. Yes, we need data. That needs to be backed by data as well. And within that, the implementation frameworks have to be there. Number two, we really have to look at demand management, right? And that came out strongly. Do more with less water. Do something different. Don't do thermal, do renewables, for example, came out as well. Then when we're talking about either cross-state or cross-country water sharing, it's so important to build trust. I think that's a critical issue, and we do have tools to do that. So I could see fora between different countries talking about water, just moving into it step by step. I also feel that an issue like floods helps different countries to talk together. Everybody has to solve the problem of floods. Also talking about climate change. And definitely these discussions or dialogues have to be informed by good science as well. Good. I think there's definitely some ways forward for us, and I really appreciate the audience interaction and very much appreciate the wonderful panel we had today. Thank you all so much. Okay, good.